My name is Julie Riskin, and I'm a member of the Legal Services Corporation Board of Directors. And it's my pleasure now to introduce the Executive Director of the Alaska Legal Services Corporation, Nicole Nelson, who will moderate our next panel. Alaska Legal Services Corporation is Alaska's only LSC-funded program and the only statewide provider of free legal assistance to low-income Alaskans. And statewide in Alaska has a broader and more substantial meaning. Nicole has served as the executive director since 2010 and oversees more than 50 staff members located within 12 statewide offices, as well as 6 medical legal partnership sites. Nicole, thank you so much for spending your time with us to moderate this panel, which is sure to be incredible.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thanks for having me here today and for giving me this opportunity to moderate such a great panel. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a bit of background about myself. I've had the good fortune for the last 20 years of making my home and raising my family in Anchorage, Alaska, which is also the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Dena'ina people. And my service area includes the entire state of Alaska, which is home to 229 tribes. Alaska Native peoples live in both urban and remote communities within our state and represent about 18% of our population. And so Alaska is proudly the most Indigenous state in the Union. Through my work in life, in our community, I've had the daily opportunity to see Alaska Native leadership and values in action. This includes elected and appointed officials, both on the state, local, and federal level, as well as in our tribal governments. This is in our business and nonprofit leadership, our community members, and my dear friends. And we are collectively the better for it. Alaska Native leaders have been on the front lines of addressing the pandemic response in our community, and particularly in our rural and remote communities, and they have been helping to keep us all safe. I think this holds true across Indigenous communities in the lower 48 as well, where we see Native American communities and leadership taking extraordinary and heroic efforts to keep communities safe, despite overwhelming challenges that they face daily due to distance and geography and limited infrastructure. In today's panel, we are going to talk about the challenges Indigenous communities in the U.S. are facing during the pandemic and how it is disproportionately impacting and taking Native American lives. But in doing so, we need to acknowledge that the obstacles Native communities are facing are due to pre-existing systemic inequities directly related to colonization, and because tribal communities have been infrastructure and resource starved. The pandemic has worsened the systemic inequities, and today we're going to talk about how LSC-funded legal aid providers working in such communities are being impacted and are responding. Today, our panelists include, first off, I'm really honored that we will have Dr. Melissa Begay join us. Dr. Begay is a physician and assistant professor at the University of New Mexico Department of Pulmonary Sleep and Critical Care. She is also a member of the Navajo Nation. Dr. Begay recently gave an outstanding Grand Rounds presentation on the effects of COVID-19 on the Navajo Nation, and we are truly honored that she would be able to take time away today from her busy schedule to help us understand the issues facing Indigenous communities during the pandemic. I am also pleased to introduce 3 of my colleagues who serve as executive directors of LSC-funded programs. First off, we have Stephanie Hudson, who is the Executive Director of Oklahoma Indian Legal Services, where she's served since 2000. She taught tribal law and served as a clinical professor for the American Indian Wills Clinic at Oklahoma City University College of Law, and also serves on the Access to Justice Commission for the Supreme Court of Oklahoma. She is a descendant of Chief Lone Wolf and Monkey of the Kiowa tribe. Also, we have Rudy Sanchez with his 30 years of experience working in LSC-funded legal aid programs. He is currently the executive director of DNA People's Legal Services, which is headquartered in Arizona. Previously, he worked at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, where he served as the deputy director, among doing a myriad of other positions. And then finally, we have Anthony Young. Anthony Young is the executive director of Southern Arizona Legal Aid. He's been there since 2007, and he's worked as a legal aid attorney since 1991 and managed legal aid offices in Nebraska and Arizona. And he serves on Arizona's Supreme Court Commission on Access to Justice. Before we get to my fellow executive directors, I'd really like to turn now to Dr. Begay, our honored guest, and who I hope will give us an overview of how the pandemic is impacting Indigenous communities across the US. But before doing that, Dr. Begay, can I ask you to tell us a bit about yourself first, including where you grew up and what your current patient population is?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. And I am in the beautiful city of Albuquerque right now. So I grew up in the northeastern portion of the Navajo Reservation in a small town called Black Rock near Canyon de Chelly. So I was raised there. And now I am an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico, where we primarily serve patients in New Mexico, but also we see many Native Americans here in the state.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us. I mentioned earlier that this pandemic is disproportionately impacting Native Americans. What can you tell us about the rates of infection and deaths in Indigenous communities across the country that's being reported by the Indian Health Service?
Sure. So just like Representative Deb Haaland gave a really great introduction to the issues facing Native Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic, across the nation, you have seen a disproportionate amount of infection with COVID cases. Not only that, due to the long-standing health inequities, we have definitely seen increased rates of mortality and morbidity from COVID-19. So that means that more patients are, Native American patients are seeing the sequelae of severe infection with COVID-19. And the issue to accessing affordable quality care has been a long-standing issue for many of our Native communities throughout the United States. And in the landscape has definitely portrayed this across Indian country, where you have many tribes who are politically and socially distinct. They have their own healthcare systems often. So in general, there are some tribes doing better than others. But again, many tribes face the same economic, environmental, and social determinants of health issues, which really sets up this great disease burden from COVID-19.
Thank you. I understand you've been working and addressing the epidemic on the Navajo Nation currently. How does this inform your view of the data that is being put out by Indian Health Service at this point?
So some of the challenges with data surveillance has definitely presented a barrier in how tribes are able to mitigate COVID-19. Access to real-time, timely data is important because it definitely drives these key policy decisions that are being made. But the data here in Navajo Nation in the Four Corners area shows that we are definitely a hotspot area. And in the beginning of May 2020, Navajo Nation had seen the highest per capita rate of infections with COVID-19. And again, it appears that we have reached our peak here, May 1st in 2020, and we are seeing fortunately a decline with flattening the curve with these extreme measures that have been taken. But in general, the Southwest has seen a definite outbreak of cases.
Thank you. I understand from our previous conversation that we had that trauma can be associated with health status for many Native American people. Can you help us understand that?
Sure. So when you talk about trauma, a lot of this results from inability to access quality health care. And the trauma that a lot of our Native patients are seeing are that, they have been dealing with these social inequities, specifically poverty, lack of access to resources. Many communities are seen as a food desert, as a water desert, which sets up sort of this perfect culmination in Native patients having to deal with a disproportionately high amount of chronic disease, and specifically obesity, cardiovascular disease, lung disease, which not only increases the chances of being infected with COVID-19, but also suffering from the severe form of the illness. And these contributing factors of, let's take poverty. 1 in 4 Native Americans currently today lives in poverty. The median income on Navajo Nation is about $27,000, and 44% of children continue to live in poverty. And so when you pair this with lack of infrastructure, specifically access to clean running water, 30% of households do not have access to running water. This definitely presents a challenge for prevention of disease. And so this all culminates in, having trauma related to the COVID-19 pandemic that is definitely fueled by longstanding health and social inequities.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. I think that people might not understand how these inequities play out in Native communities. One thing, so I can imagine when you're talking about lack of limited infrastructure and resources like running water and broadband, how does that play out specifically in the pandemic? I imagine it's difficult for people to keep themselves healthy in those circumstances.
Correct. I think, lack of water has a huge issue when you're asking people to wash their hands on a daily basis, multiple times a day. If you have a family that has to drive 2 hours to get water, they are going to ration that water because they also have to cook with that water. They have to water their gardens, feed their animals. And so this lack of water really does have a huge, it really does have a huge effect on disease prevention. And we cannot stress this enough, that lack of water definitely leads to the poor health status of our Native American communities. The second issue is access to resources. So when the pandemic started, our Navajo president, Nez, enacted strict curfew laws. This was very important in mitigating the prevention of disease spread, but also it sort of placed a burden on family members who then could not leave their homes to access essential supplies. And so, this really is just the crux of the problem is a lack of access to water. Another issue is broadband. Broadband is essential in areas that are resource poor. The Navajo Nation is as large as the state of West Virginia, and we have very few hospitals, very few ICU beds, which is why a lot of the patients are airlifted out to university hospitals. But the lack of broadband prevents many telehealth services from being delivered. It prevents access to timely and efficient data. And it really prevents the delivery of healthcare services in an area that's already resource poor. So having access to data from a health point status would be very important in having access to telehealth and broadband. And also, you know, families don't have to travel brought to connect to the internet for work or school. But broadband would definitely increase our national telemedicine services to these communities that really, really need it.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about the challenges that we're seeing in Indigenous communities. Before we move on to our legal aid providers, I'd just like to ask if you see any opportunities or hope in this moment in particular.
Sure. Thank you for asking this question. I think we must find a silver lining in this pandemic. What I have seen is that there is a renewal of cultural values. The Navajo people are very strong in their values. We are resilient. And so the silver lining is this: when you invite Native communities to the table, we are key stakeholders, and we can come up with solutions. We are creative in finding and addressing the issues that are prevalent in our communities. And I think the pandemic has showed that this resiliency will come through.
Thank you so much, and I couldn't agree more. All right, so next up, we are going to move over to Rudy Sanchez, who is the Executive Director of DNA's People's Legal Services, which provides free legal help in remote areas of 3 different states and 7 Native American nations, including the Navajo Nation. Rudy, you and your staff and clients are at the center of this outbreak. Can you tell us a little bit about your service area, when the outbreak started, and then also the local and tribal government responses?
The DNA service area stretches over large portions of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Our main office is in Window Rock, Arizona, a city that's on the Arizona-New Mexico state line. And Window Rock is the capital of the Navajo Nation, and it has a population of about 3,000 people. And the area where we're located is extremely rural. It's beautiful, scenic. You can see Window Rock behind me. But the largest city in our service area is off reservation. It's Flagstaff, Arizona, with a population of about 75,000. Most of our funding and our resources go to provide services to Native Americans. And so the 3 largest tribes in our service area are the Navajo Nation, and that's the largest tribe in the United States. It has a land mass of over 26,600 square miles and a population of roughly 300,000. And then the Hopi Nation, which is encircled primarily by the Navajo Nation, that also is a large tribe with a land mass of 1.8 acres and a population of about 15,000. And then we also have the Jicarilla Apache Nation, which is on the New Mexico side of our operation, and that has a land mass of 928,000 acres and a population of about 4,000. And then we also have a number of smaller tribes in our service area, including the Kebab Paiute, the San Juan, the Hualapai, and the Havasupai. So in early March, it was clear that the coronavirus was going to be a major health crisis. And because of concerns for the health and safety of our staff and clients, we implemented emergency preparedness and pandemic plan on March 12th. And then a few days later, one of my attorneys wrote to me a very, very brief email, and she wrote, "There's one confirmed case of coronavirus in Navajo County on the res. Take care and be safe." And since receiving that first email, the coronavirus has spread like wildfire across the reservation. And as of August 1st, there were 9,100 cases on the Navajo Nation. So our service area cuts across multiple state and tribal jurisdictions, and it's very time intensive to keep up with the various public health and safety orders that have been issued by the various tribal and governmental entities. And so for the sake of brevity, I'm going to highlight the orders that were issued by the Navajo tribes and the Hopi tribe. And I'm going to mention briefly how those directives, mainly Navajo, meshed with orders that we received from the state of New Mexico and local New Mexico governmental entities. So the Navajo Nation has been extremely proactive, as Dr. Begay had mentioned, in responding to the outbreak of the virus. And the first of 6 executive orders declaring a state of emergency was issued on March 13th. The last executive order extending the state of emergency was issued on July 22nd, and that runs through mid-August, but most likely it's going to be extended before it expires. The executive orders restricted government employee travel off the reservation, closed governmental offices, granted administrative leave to non-essential employees, and closed schools. And then the Navajo Nation coordinated some of these restrictions with the state of New Mexico and the city of Gallup. Many of my staff in Window Rock, including myself, live in Gallup, New Mexico, but we travel across the state line to work in Arizona. And Gallup was on a lockdown in early June. Navajo police patrolled the border and didn't allow people on to or off the reservation. And the governor of New Mexico brought in the National Guard to close off the highways. And the city of Gallup and the state troopers also patrolled the streets and didn't allow people to leave and come and go from the city of Gallup. The Navajo Department of Health has also issued orders that have piggybacked on the executive orders. And these directives have required residents of the Navajo Nation to shelter in place. They've closed non-essential businesses. They've imposed a nightly curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. They've imposed a weekend curfew from 8 p.m. on Friday to 5 a.m. on Monday. They've limited public gatherings to no more than 5, with the exceptions of funerals where you could have up to 10 people. They've mandated the wearing of masks and other measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Then the courts have also had their own orders. The Navajo Supreme Court issued an administrative order on March 25th limiting services and closing the courts and urging district courts to do the same. And each of the Navajo judicial districts have adopted measures to limit court activities, but it depends on the specific court and how strong the prevalence of the virus is in their area. The Hopi Nation has also been very proactive. The Hopi Nation has issued an executive order on March 23rd, and this order has been extended multiple times, and it runs until the end of August. They've also shut down all non-essential governmental businesses, issued a stay-at-home order, implemented a nightly and weekend curfew, prohibited travel on, off, or through the reservation, closed all tourist activities, closed all non-essential governmental offices and businesses, and mandated the wearing of masks. And these restrictions are in effect until the end of August, but most likely they'll be extended as well. And that's also extended to the court system, which is unique for us because the civil side services are classified as non-essential. And so technically we have to close, but the criminal side is still open because criminal defendants have rights. We serve as the public defender, so we have to have staff who still go to the office and who still provide these services. And it's much more challenging because prisoners are kept in jail, and jails are a hotspot for the virus itself.
Well, thank you, Rudy. It sounds like you're really navigating, the jurisdictional web that those of us working in Indigenous communities often face. But it sounds like you've got a lot of you and your staff are navigating a complex web of closures, and that's challenging. Can you just tell me a little bit quickly about first how DNA is responding? What are the legal needs happening, and how are you continuing to serve folks?
Well, we had 3 goals. Number 1 was individual safety for our clients and for our staff. 2, we wanted to continue providing services. And 3, we wanted to comply with the various health and safety orders. And so the steps we took to address those goals are, number 1, on March 12th, we issued an emergency pandemic plan. On March 18th, we closed our offices to the public. posted a notice on website letting potential applicants know that they could apply by phone or online. We placed ads on the radio and in the local paper making the same announcement. And we also put large signs up in front of our office. Shortly after that, we let our legal staff work from home, and we soon extended that to support staff and to administrative staff. We had, this year we recruited a large class of law clerks. When it became clear that we couldn't provide a safe work environment for them, we let them know that their internships would be remote, and they all decided to stay with us. We upgraded our technology so that now, with the exception of 1 or 2 staff who live in areas where you just don't have any broadband access or internet access, everyone has the ability to work from home for part or all of the work week. Our office closures have tracked the Navajo and Hopi public health and safety orders for the most part. Many of our staff, however, have been given the discretion to, and they've used that discretion to come to the office to work on occasion as they find necessary. To keep staff who go to the office to choose, to keep them safe, we set up sanitation stations that have disinfectants, masks, and gloves. We also require masks in a common area and social distancing. We paid for most of the supplies that we bought, and we buy significant supplies of disinfectants, masks, and those sorts of materials. We used LSC emergency COVID-19 funding. We also got a LSC technical expansion grant. And we've also repurposed monies that we were planning to use for summer outreach. And then we also adopted a policy to allow staff to take time off for COVID-related absences.
Thank you, Rudy. Thanks for sharing that and for doing the great work that your folks are doing. I want to ask you just one last question. How is your staff doing? How are they holding up?
The staff is holding up, but they're under tremendous pressure. You know, even in the best of times, life on the reservation is hard because there are limited grocery stores and limited places to shop, limited gas stations, and so you have to travel off reservation, and you have to deal with the curfews that have kicked into place. We've had a number of scares, including staff who've had to self-quarantine. We've had a number of staff who have had family members get sick, but luckily none of our staff themselves have gotten sick. But many of the staff have had family members who've gotten sick, including several who unfortunately have passed away.
Thanks, Rudy. We're sending our love to your staff. Anthony, your service area, your legal aid program is Southern Arizona Legal Aid. You provide free legal services to low-income individuals and families in Southern and Southeastern Arizona and to 11 of Arizona's Native American tribes. How have your clients who live on tribal lands had different legal needs than the general population since the pandemic began?
Actually, clients on the reservations that we serve have not experienced different legal problems than communities outside of the reservation, except with respect to evictions. Because the tribe provides housing for its members, we have not experienced an eviction crisis on the reservations that we serve. My program has 12 staff assigned to the indigenous populations that we serve. All of the tribes have either enacted stay-at-home orders or shelter-in-place orders. Some of you may be aware that the Apache tribe has had the most difficulty with the virus. At Fort Apache, the tribe has instituted probably some of the most draconian measures to address the virus. My office is located in a community center on the Apache reservation. That community center also houses a number of social services agencies and the community library. That community center has been closed since the onset of the virus, and my staff have not been able to access that office and are working remotely. The tribe instituted a 14-day quarantine where the entire reservation was on lockdown with a stay-at-home order. No visitor could come onto the reservation unless they could demonstrate that they were essential to the tribe. And no tribal member could leave except on designated days and for certain hours to get essentials or to travel to work, and they had to demonstrate traveling to work. That stay-at-home order was recently lifted about a week ago, and now the tribe is on a shelter-in-place order along with a curfew. All recreational activities, including the casino, are closed. All bars are closed, and alcohol is currently banned on the reservation. The tribe has prohibited the possession of alcohol to prevent bootlegging. Tribal members caught 2 times possessing alcohol for purposes of sale can be banned from the reservation. To address the challenge of having intergenerational households on the reservation, the tribe has set up a quarantine center for those who have contracted COVID-19. They're currently using a treatment center and the hotel casino so that persons who have contracted the virus can self-quarantine at the casino or hotel during the 14-day quarantine period. Courts on the reservation has just recently opened. We received notice last week that the courts are opened on a limited basis and are only conducting hearings by telephone. And they're primarily, as Rudy mentioned, addressing criminal matters. Civil matters are not considered a priority. On the Pasquayaki tribe, just outside of Tucson, they also have a shelter-in-place order. Their tribe is open, the court rather is open on a limited basis for both in-person and telephonic hearings. The Autumn Nation has a stay-at-home order. Their main city and court is about 50 miles from Tucson, and our tribal advocates travel from Tucson to appear in court on behalf of our clients on the reservation. In fact, one of our tribal advocates was here this morning preparing to travel for a court hearing today. That court has been open since about mid-June, I would say. The end of June it's been open. They've instituted some, I would argue, draconian measures with respect to how hearings are being conducted. Hearings are being conducted in person, but social distancing and masks are required. There is plexiglass between the judge and the litigants, and the litigants are required to social distance and have masks while in the court. And so that has made it difficult for our advocates to conduct trials since they have to social distance and can't have conversations with their clients as they're proceeding through the litigation. On the Gila River Indian community, that tribe has 2 locations, one located just outside of Phoenix in Maricopa County, and the other located in Pinal County. The tribe has enacted a shelter-in-place order, still in existence. Non-priority cases are on hold indefinitely, and that includes the majority of civil proceedings, save certain orders of protection. Courts are conducting hearings on a limited basis, primarily by telephone. On that reservation, our office is located in Zacaton, Arizona. In addition to providing basic civil legal services, that office is also the provider of legal services to persons subject to civil commitment proceedings. And we've seen an increase in the number of referral of those cases to our office on the Gila River Reservation. At Fort Yuma, Quashon, the court is generally closed to anyone other than parties who have hearings that have been set by the judges. We know that the court administrator has been going into the office to address filings and to allow the community to file documents. The Akshan, Salt River, Pima, Yavapai Nation all have stay-at-home orders, and their courts are open on a limited basis. The challenges that we've been experiencing with the courts is the changes, or the frequent changes, I should say, in hours of operations for the court, creating uncertainty. Our clients, like our attorneys, have found themselves surprised to find that the courthouse is closed, or there's been a reduction or change in hours that have not been announced to the community. Some courts are allowing parties to file documents via email, but this does not rise to the level of electronic filing that we have in the state courts. Despite this accommodation, people choose to file their documents by first-class mail. In many cases, they do not have access to broadband or technology to be able to file by email or fax or scan documents to the court.
All right. Well, thank you, Anthony. It sounds like there's a whole host of different things happening in that area with a lot of challenges for getting folks into courts. Let's move over now to our next executive director. And this is the wonderful Stephanie Hudson, who is the executive director of Oklahoma Indian Legal Services. And Stephanie, before we hear about how COVID-19 affected the legal needs of your clients, can you give a bit of background on some of the unique challenges of your service area?
Thank you, Nicole. For those of you who are familiar with Oklahoma, you'll understand that the land itself causes issues with providing services. Unlike Arizona and New Mexico, Oklahoma is made up of a checkerboard of jurisdictional areas within the state. There are 39 different tribal governments, and we have 30 different tribal courts. As you'll see on the map here, each one of the colors represents a different tribal government's jurisdictional area. And the purple one on the right-hand side, right in the middle, that's the Muskogee Creek Nation. Oklahoma has tribal members who still live on tribal lands. Quite a few tribal members still live on tribal lands. My mother, she lives on land that is part of our family's allotment, and it was an allotment given to my ancestors by the federal government. Oklahoma Indian Legal Services attorneys, we provide services to all tribal members, members from all tribes, and we practice in every tribal court in the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a large state, so it's a large area to provide services. Now, there are laws that apply only to Native Americans. There's the Indian Child Welfare Act. There's the American Indian Probate and Reform Act. There are the laws and treaties of the 5 tribes of Oklahoma. And our attorneys, they are experts in those areas of law. And it's difficult to find attorneys in Oklahoma who really understand the ins and outs of those particular laws. Our attorneys, they have many years of experience in those areas. I think most of you have probably heard a lot in the news about the recent McGirt versus Oklahoma decision from the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's going to affect tribal jurisdictions. It's affecting tribal jurisdictions right now for the Muskogee Creek Nation, and there's a possibility that it's going to affect a lot more of the tribes in Oklahoma. And the Oils attorneys, we are studying those decisions, and we're staying on top of how that's going to affect our caseload for low-income tribal members in Oklahoma.
Okay. Wow, so it sounds like in addition to dealing with the pandemic, you also have sort of a groundbreaking Supreme Court decision that changes the law and very limited attorneys in a specialized area of practice. That's a huge, yes, a burden. So your program, like mine and most others serving Native communities, you serve folks who aren't living on tribal lands. And a recent statistic I saw was that upwards of 70% of Alaska Native and Native American people live off of reservations and in urban or suburban communities. Can you help folks understand any legal issues that arise because of that?
I sure will. So many of our tribal members and many of the tribal communities, they're in rural Oklahoma, and you can see from the map there that most of the jurisdictions are in rural Oklahoma. The wonderful thing about tribes being in rural Oklahoma is that they invest back into the communities. The funding that the income that the tribes make from their different business enterprises, they plow back right into the communities. And a lot of, in Oklahoma, because of the checkerboard jurisdiction and the way that the Indian communities are mixed in with the non-Indian communities, the rural communities benefit very much from the from the tribes being within rural Oklahoma. But being rural, many tribal members have moved from rural locations to urban locations, just simply looking for jobs, looking for education. There have been other historical reasons why tribal members have moved from rural locations to urban locations. So Oklahoma City and Tulsa have large Indian populations. And actually Tulsa, I believe, is the second largest urban population within the United States. What happens when a person is disconnected from their tribal community and they're in an urban location, they don't have access to the tribal resources. Many tribes only provide resources, just simply because of the cost and reasonableness of providing services to somebody outside of their jurisdiction. So there's a lot of tribal members in Oklahoma who don't have the resources that the tribes provide. Tribes provide assistance with housing, they provide assistance with health care, school supplies, food assistance, services for elders. So there's a lot of tribal members who can't easily access that because they live in an urban area. What OILS does is we don't look at whether they live within their jurisdictional boundary or not. We'll serve them no matter where they're located. And what we try to do is we try to use the fact that we are working within all the tribes in Oklahoma to locate different resources that urban Indians can access. What we do is we try to partner with different organizations like the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic or the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference with the United Methodist Church here in Oklahoma. We try to partner with those organizations to help urban Indians find resources.
Fantastic. So I heard, Stephanie, that although your program came up with this really innovative way to address outreach during the pandemic. And so I was hoping you'd tell us a bit about how your drive-through Wills Clinic. I love this idea.
Every summer, our office invites interns, law students, to come join us at the office for the summertime. We have students who come from all over the United States, and they travel with us on what we call Wills caravans or Wills clinics. And what we do is we take a number of people from in the office, attorney staff, and then our law students will go with us. We'll, get into cars and drive to one of the remote tribal locations, and we will set up mobile law offices in that tribal community. One of the things that we do is we put all of our office supplies into Igloo blue coolers. They're real sturdy, so they travel well. And we'll come up to a community and we'll all get out of the cars and we'll have our blue Igloo coolers and we'll pull them into the community and set up a law office, and we can prepare wills, advance directives, powers of attorney, transfer on death deeds. We do all those in the community because we don't want elders having to travel out of the communities. We have not been able to do that this year, and it's been distressing to our attorneys that we have elders out there who, this is a real time when legal documents need to be taken care of and legal affairs need to be in order. And our attorneys have been very distressed about the fact that they haven't been able to get out there and do that. what we have done is kind of changed our game plan. We are still going to go out into the communities, but with just a limited number of staff, very few staff at a time. And what we're doing is we're setting up those same mobile offices, but we're doing them drive-through. Is we'll set up outside Oklahoma. It's fine to set outside. We set up a canopy, and we have the elders drive through, and we have on PPE. They have on PPE. We've been able to purchase PPE thanks to funding from Legal Services Corporation, and we'll have the elders execute the documents in a drive-through situation. We'll have all the documents prepared ahead of time, and then they drive through and execute. We give them all the documents, but we do it in a very safe way.
That's fantastic. I love that. So I have just one last question for you. What are the, would you tell us what the biggest legal issues are that you see your clients struggling with the most during this time?
Our clients are struggling with, like I said, wanting to get wills prepared. We've had a number of people calling in with wills and wanting wills prepared. And the other thing that we're seeing a large increase in is the number of family cases and guardianship cases, people wanting to make sure that they get those situations taken care of. Oklahoma has had just a horrible, horrible situation with dealing with providing unemployment benefits and not being able to handle it correctly because of antiquated equipment. We have worked in partnership with our sister organization, Legal Aid Services of Oklahoma, to refer a lot of those cases over there and a lot of the eviction cases over there. They are masters of handling those situations and really do a really good job of that. So it takes both of our organizations here in Oklahoma in order to cover what all of the legal needs are for the citizens of Oklahoma.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. This has been a really fantastic panel, and I want to, I could talk with everyone forever, but we have limited time. So I wanted to wrap up and say what I think is across the board we are seeing in Indigenous communities across the U.S. Is that people are acting heroically with limited resources to keep our communities safe and to get the legal help that people need to make sure that they can access justice, and that legal aid is a part of that. I particularly want to thank Dr. Begay for spending some time with us. I know your time is valuable and you've got important work to do, as do my fellow executive directors. But thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us in Koyana.